Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 793 on the 17th of December 2023. I've had to shut the Skeptic Zone studio window, which I normally do to record because of the odd noise coming from outside, but it's pretty steamy, it's pretty warm, and I'm thinking of my friends over at Skeptoid Media in Bend, Oregon, because they're having their Christmas party today, and they're rugging up and standing next to fires because it's so cold. I wish I was there, friends, I really do. That sounds very inviting at the moment. Anyway, we'll press on here in the Skeptic Zone sauna. On this week's show, we're going to kick off with an interview Adrienne Hill conducted with Dr. Christopher Labos. And he'll be discussing his book, Does Coffee Cause Cancer? And 8 More Myths About the Food We Eat. A very interesting sounding book indeed. And as you will discover, you can actually listen to this book as well, a segment. And this is a very, shall we say, edited version of the full interview. And the full interview is available. In fact, if you go to this week's show notes at skepticzone.tv, there is a link to the full interview with Dr. Christopher Labos. Does coffee cause cancer? And 8 more myths about the food we eat. Interview coming up at the top of the show. Following that, it's the final roundtable discussion between Brian Dunning, Fraser Cain, and myself. And this week we do talk about artificial intelligence. I think I said last week we would. I don't think we quite got to it in the last segment. This time we get to that. But anyway, this is the final in that 5-part series. Following that, it's the Australian Skeptics Newsletter, read by Adrienne Hill, written by Tim Mendham. Thank you both for reading and writing. And don't forget that you can subscribe to the newsletter from the Australian Skeptics, and it contains more than you hear on this show. This is what you hear is only the highlights. There are many more little snippets and more information, plus lots of links. So I encourage you, even though it's nice to have some of it read to you, I encourage you to subscribe regardless at skeptics.com.au. And to round off in the Trove segment, we're not actually going into the Trove segment, we're going to go down the street. I was walking down the street the other day getting some exercise when I happened across this leaflet, this flyer. It's quite a lengthy flyer, printed in blue ink. Chinese and traditional medicine, acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine, complete health care for your whole family. We're going to be looking into some of the claims made in this flyer. All right, well, that's enough for me at the moment. It's time for me to run downstairs and have some more cool, cold water, or maybe some cordial. My sister, the other week for my birthday, found a bottle of musk stick-flavoured cordial. Australians know what I mean, and my American friends are now making faces in horror. I might have some of that. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. You can count on Adrienne with Adrienne Hill.
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill from Skookum Studios in Calgary, Alberta, and today I have a really special guest with me. I have Dr. Christopher Labos. And according to his bio on the McGill Office for Science and Society, he spends most of his time doing things that he doesn't get paid for, like doing research, teaching, and podcasting. And occasionally he finds time to practice as a cardiologist so he can pay his rent. And he writes, of course, for the McGill Office for Science and Society, and now has written a book. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
We will be talking about your book. It's called Does Coffee Cause Cancer? And 8 More Myths About the Food We Eat. Your book is not your traditional science book that goes through why the headlines are bad, etc., or why pea hacking occurs, or the many things that you tackle. You tackled it as a fictional story that intertwines the science, methodology, and the pitfalls. Is there a reason that you chose that format?
When I first wrote up the prospectus, it was a fairly traditional science communication book. First chapter I wrote as a sample chapter was the one on coffee.
Oh, okay.
And whether there's a cancer link between coffee and cancer. And so I wrote it out and I was exploring all these issues. And a lot of the analogies are still there. So if you read the chapter, you see that I talk about selection bias, which is a common epidemiological concept, and I explain why it can skew things, and I give examples. So a lot of the content was the same, but it was written as a straight science book. And so I eventually got an agent. The agent pitched it to the publisher. Publisher got in touch with me directly. We had a conversation, and he was like, it's good, but is there a way to sort of change it to make it better? And we bounced around a few different ideas. And he eventually raised a book that some listeners may be familiar with. It's called The Wealthy Barber.
Yes.
The Wealthy Barber was a book about finance. And it used this type of structure where people were coming into a barbershop and the barber would talk to them about investment and estate planning and stuff like that. So it was a way of using dialogue to advance a core message. And so he raised that idea and I said, well, I do a podcast with my friend Jonathan, which is 2 people talking. Maybe we could do that. And he said, all right, develop it and let's see where it goes. And so I really sort of did it in that way. Yeah.
And I'm just going to spoil one thing. It's not really a spoiler, but actually I listened to it and read it. I have a book, an actual copy. So if you do listen to it, the person who reads it on Audible is very good, I thought. And I liked having the physical copy because there's charts and there's comics, there's some comedic elements, and you don't get that if you're listening to it. So it's nice to have both. So I'm going to plug both of them. I got through to the end and I went, what's the protagonist's name?
Yeah.
And I flipped through the whole thing to going, did I miss it? So just a warning to all of you who are going to read the book, you never find out his name. How did you decide on the 8 things you were going to write about?
So the way you write a book for people who want to know is, if you're going to go via the traditional pathway of getting an agent and a publisher, you need to have the book more or less mapped out. And so I started off with, I think, 10 original ideas, and I wanted each chapter to be on an epidemiological concept. This is a book about epidemiology, which is so boring, nobody would buy it. So I'm like, okay, we're going to make it about food to make it more interesting for people because everybody cares about food. And then we're going to throw in the romance aspect of it and all that. So each chapter was going to be about a specific point in epidemiology. So if you're reading it from the science perspective, every chapter is going to have a lesson that you can then use to apply for future. So the first chapter, which is about vitamin C, is also going to teach you about the dangers of subgroup analysis and pea hacking. When we talk about red meat and we're talking about the cancer potential of eating red meat, and IARC and all that, you're going to learn about the differences between hazard and risk. I had sort of mapped out the key epidemiological concepts that I wanted to tackle, and I came out with about 10 of them, and I tried to make them all food related. We can quibble about whether the vitamin C and vitamin D chapter are really food-based or not, but I thought I could permit myself a certain literary license there. I put stuff in, I'd taken stuff out. I was going to do a chapter on fish oils instead of vitamin D, but then at the end, the vitamin D stuff just flowed better. And a lot of it ended up being driven by the narrative, shockingly enough.
Interesting.
Because I needed the characters to hit certain points.
Yeah.
When you're at the airport, I thought, what happens when you're at the airport? People are sick, vitamin C. Okay, that works. And then you're on a plane. Well, if you're on a plane, you're talking about food. It's got to be the meal that's in front of you. So maybe it should be the meat versus not.
And it's funny, it was one of my faster reads I've had this year. I finished it very quickly. I enjoyed it. And when it ended, I was actually disappointed. And I want to know what happened to those characters. Is there going to be a second book with the characters?
There is a treatise for a second book with the characters. Whether it sees the light of day, I think is largely going to depend on the sales.
Right. Well, I sure hope you get a second book. And I'm just going to go back a little bit to something just because I'm a math teacher. That's my former life. One of my favorite things that you tackled was how you can have true statistics and they're actually correct.
Yeah.
However, they can be extremely misleading based on how you use them. And you used the lottery ticket analogy, which I thought was brilliant. Your chances of winning the lottery are 1 in 14 million. If you buy 2 tickets, you double your chances.
Yeah. It's still a very small risk. It's still a very small risk.
It's very unlikely you're going to win still. And I think that's a really important one to get across to people because there's so much fear in health products.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I mean, and completely understandably. But I mean, the problem is that there's a lot of fear in health because, I mean, obviously nobody wants to get sick, but the statistics involved are sometimes a little bit counterintuitive and they don't mean what we think they mean. And it's not a question of having an advanced math degree. And sometimes the math itself is not that complicated. It's just that you have to understand the actual definitions. And people who don't know because they have no training for it, and journalists who have no training in science, so I think for the general public, I think they're sometimes a little bit thrown, like, why is there so much subtlety and subjectivity to statistical research? And that's, I think, a point that's hard to sort of get across sometimes, is like a lot of times statistical research is subjective. Yeah. And I mean, this is the issue also, just to tease something from the book. This is the issue that we get into with red wine research. And why does it look as if red wine is protective? Well, it really makes a difference how you categorize the people who drink zero alcohol. Are they never drinkers or are they former drinkers? And if you think like, who cares? Well, that's where you start to get into issues. So it's these little tiny things that I think when you hear them for the first time, we're like, wow, that's actually kind of fascinating. And to a certain extent, also a little bit worrying because a simple decision made almost on the fly can have a dramatic impact in, whether your study shows a benefit or shows a harm.
Exactly. I do think that these varying headlines that we get, 1 minute, coffee causes cancer, the next minute, coffee cures everything, because another study has come out. And that, I think, leads to the distrust of science and studies. And people I guess they can start cherry picking the ones they want to believe, or they can just distrust everything. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's definitely a lot of truth to that. I think once you get into a situation where you just have these sort of conflicting headlines from one day to the next, eventually people just tune it out, right? Where it becomes problematic is when you get something like the French paradox, like the idea that red wine is good for you, and it just hits at the right moment on the right venue, like it did on that 60-minute story with Morley Safer. And then it just explodes. And then you really can't get away from it. It's very fascinating to watch people, even very intelligent people, like, they have these biases and they're like, no, red wine is good for you. Although I guess it like increases your risk of diabetes, causes weight gain, increases your blood pressure, and is bad for your health overall. But still, it's cardioprotective. I'm like, how is it cardioprotective? It's doing everything terrible for your generalized health. And I mean, again, it's not to say that you can't drink wine. I mean, I'm drunk right now. I'm kidding. I'm not. But you can certainly drink alcohol. Where I think it's dangerous is to convince yourself that it's good for you and see it not as a treat, but as health food, which it's not. And this health food label is being applied to a lot of different foods now. We're seeing it with chocolate, periodically touted as a health food, even though it's really just loaded with sugar and fat.
Dark chocolate.
Yeah, dark chocolate. I mean, people are talking about it as if it's vegetables. I mean, it's not. And even dark chocolate is not healthy for you. It's really interesting to see how people can sort of use this uncertainty in the scientific literature to sort of really hype a particular position they have, whether it's economics. A lot of this is being promoted by lobby groups, right? So like there's a lot of lobby groups for chocolate, a lot of lobby groups for alcohol. But then you also get into stuff like, low carb, high fat or low fat, high carb. Like what's better? And you have these people fighting it out and like, you realize both of these are bad for you and that you should just eat it's really surprising how entrenched a lot of people can become in these opinions where you sort of ask them, like, well, take a step back with me. Do you realize that there's no conclusive evidence one way or the other? Because it's frankly impossible to do randomized trials in most circumstances, which is a point that I mentioned in the book as well, with the one exception of chocolate, where we actually did do a randomized trial on chocolate. It did nothing, but it hasn't made the myth go away. People are like, well, there's still health benefits to chocolate. No, but we did. It was called Cosmos. It was supposed to be the definitive study to settle the issue of whether there were health benefits to chocolate. It happened. It got published. No one cared.
Well, I think that's a great way to end here. And thank you so much for joining me. Can you tell us where people can find your work?
You can order it on Amazon, or you can even order it directly from the publisher at www.doescoffeecausecancer.com. But it comes to the same thing. Just go buy the book, buy 10 copies for your friends because it makes a great Christmas gift. If you want to hear what the book is like, I mean, there is the audiobook version, but then Jonathan and I, and a special mystery guest, read chapter 2 of the book like an old time radio play. So you can listen to that. It's our most recent podcast episode. If you go check out the podcast, which is bodyofevidence.ca.
So thank you again, Chris, for joining me. And for those of you who would like to hear more about Dr. Christopher Labos, you can hear an extended version of this interview by going to the link in this week's show notes. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill from Skookum Studios in Calgary.
Are you looking for a science-based medical podcast to answer all your questions about health? Check out The Body of Evidence. Whether you're curious about the potential benefits of omega-3s or the potential risks of vaping, we take a look at the body of evidence to separate the noise, the hype, the lies from actual scientific rigor. We do it with comedy skits. The only logical thing to do is for me to take off all my clothes and run into the street.
No, remember the first rule of podcasting. Always keep your pants on.
With jingles.
Some are thrilled, some are not. You lose that hair if you stop propitiation.
And by, discussing what the evidence has to say on the topic at hand.
Orlistat is a pill, but yeah, it has the side effects of bloating, gas, and greasy stool, which makes it very unpleasant.
The Body of Evidence. Find it at bodyofevidence.ca or on your favorite podcast app. The Body of Evidence. Medicine that tastes funny and science made easy.
Hi everyone, I'm Fraser Cain, I'm the publisher of Universe Today, and I have gathered together two of my favorite members of the skeptic community. Brian Dunning, Richard Saunders, they're right here.
Hi.
And I have been thinking a lot about the role skepticism plays, scientific knowledge, scientific literacy. How can we navigate and help other people navigate this world today? And so I wanted to just ask them a bunch of questions, free-form thoughts about this. So what do you think the future holds then? I mean, as we move into this bold new era of, I think about like artificial intelligence is not able to, you can't even trust what it says. Like it makes stuff up and it's not even it's not even trying. Like it just makes stuff up.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't.
And at scale. And like and these things can be subtle and you won't notice. They'll just sit like little time bombs across the internet.
See, I think what it is when you have, yes, AI can be used to create and propagate misinformation. People create and propagate misinformation.
It happened long before.
I don't see that it's any different because you've got to know your source and you've got to do your work, your homework to double check things.
Yeah, only that that a person who is attempting to manipulate a human being can have this being done 24/7. Obviously there are social media algorithms that have highly optimized to enrage and confuse, and this already exists and we see it working at scale. So that's just a bit of what the future might hold.
And that's also been the case though throughout history. I mean, Samuel Adams, I guess, was in charge of propaganda during the American Revolution. And one of his rules was to enrage the population by creating outrage against the enemy.
Right.
And that's exactly what the social media algorithms do today. So we're talking about things that humans do, just with different tools. So I really don't see it as a fundamental change or something that we need to suddenly be especially newly worried about.
Yeah.
I think I'm also a minority view. I think most of my colleagues would probably disagree and say, hey, we really have to worry about this AI thing. So I think mine's important to point out that I think mine's a minority view, but
I'm not worried. I just don't know what's going to happen. That doesn't mean I'm worried.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of things to worry about. You have to sort of decide which of those things you want to be worried about. But there's kind of something really interesting. Someone had written that I thought was really interesting, that the problem, like if I show you a picture of an elephant, it's vastly easier to confirm that to say that something is true than it is to generate the thing, right? So if I say, tell me this is a picture of an elephant, or I ask you to draw me a picture of an elephant, one of those tasks for a human being is easier to do, right? And so confirmation is easier than creation for human beings.
Right.
For artificial intelligence, the opposite. So generation is easier than confirmation.
Interesting.
And it's possible that, in fact, because of that, that's the only reason that they haven't run into these endless cycles of improvement, is because everything they make is to some degree nonsense. That if it was flipped, then the algorithms could be running 24/7, churning out confirmable facts, and would be increasing scientific knowledge, and it would be a kind of a runaway condition. And so the fact that the robot can never know if what it's doing is correct leaves it in this sort of state of inability to improve itself, which I find really interesting. And totally tangential.
Yes,
but that idea that we need to be able to, like, if we could confirm facts at scale by robots, would that be better for our society or not?
No, it depends if people wanted to believe them.
Yeah.
I mean, who is the arbiter of what's true or not? And any robot is going to have criticism.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. I mean, there's never going to be any substitute for just the good old-fashioned scientific method, which some simplified version of which is what we all use when we go out to verify a fact. Our friend tells us something, we want to find out if it's true. Yeah. We basically follow a simplified, quick and dirty version of the scientific method to find out.
Yeah.
If there was a book or a robot that we could just turn to and get the anointed, validated truth, then I would have questions about that source.
And it appears that doesn't exist and may never exist, which is sort of weird.
Yeah. I hope not. I don't think there ever should be an arbiter of what's true.
What's true, except for Mother Nature. Always, we believe reality. Brian, what are you obsessed with right now?
What am I obsessed with right now? I try to always pay attention to what popular belief is causing the most harm. And by harm, it can often be something as simple as spreading and causing more people to believe in something that's false. So I look at, right now, I would say it's vaccine denial, and I would also say the UFO thing. Because the UFO thing has, you look into the past of how this all came to be up until 2017 when it really exploded. It has such a horrible foundation of such a very few people with very strange beliefs who had an incredibly successful job at getting this into the public consciousness. Basically, they just killed it with the media and the PR, and now half the people believe that aliens actively visit the Earth. That's astounding to me. So that's why I made the UFO movie.
Yep.
Because that was one of the issues that I saw was at the forefront right now. This is the place where we need to point our tools for helping people to learn what's real and what's not. So it's probably still that right now, and I'm looking forward to what's the next thing, because I got to make another movie next year.
Yep. Richard?
I this is racking my brains when you ask the question. I don't think I'm particularly obsessed. I enjoy what I do very much. I enjoy making my podcast very much. Not to an obsessive degree.
Well, when I use that question,
what am I engaged in at the moment?
Yeah, it's like there is a thing that is like there's an idea that is forming in your mind, and you're noticing and patterns, and you're thinking about it, kind of rolling over your head, and it is what will happen, what you will create a year down the road.
I'm looking forward to the next big project I do. I just don't know what it is yet, but it will come, because in my skeptical career, I've done a series of big projects, about one every 5 or 6 or 7 years. I completed a year or so ago the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project, which was the largest ever database of psychic predictions analysed. It was stupendous. It's huge. That was a big achievement. And now that's all behind me. So one day I'll wake up and say, I know what the next thing is, and I'll do this.
Yeah.
And I hope to do at least 1 or 2 more big ones before I bow out of the game. Yeah. I don't know what they are yet.
Yeah. So, I mean, each one of these, though, requires upkeep, right? Like, do you keep
the prediction project?
Yeah. Do you?
No. Yes and no. It's what it was. It was covered a 20-year period. So in that respect, it can be sealed. That was the analysis of that period. Now, if I add more to the database, I could do that. I could fill around the edges, but I can't see much point because it's sort of been done. But it has inspired, I know, other groups, at least one other group here in the United States, to do a similar project. So that's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of amazing when you hold people's feet to the fire about those kind of predictions. Like, if the people make the prediction, then you can check later on if the prediction came true.
Which they're not used to having done.
No, I know. Nobody ever does this.
No. Especially the media.
Yeah.
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 So we'll see. Watch this space. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say something nice about both of you guys here, so you're going to have to take this on the chin right now. So, Richard, you did an interview in Australian television about UFOs, and your response about how excited you are about the possibility of there being alien life as a person who is skeptical about UFOs totally changed my brain about how to think about how we respond to those kinds of questions, because I'd always felt a bit like a curmudgeon. And yet I come from this place where I was as built on science fiction as anybody, and I want the answer to be yes, there's aliens. And I think the only difference between me and other people is just that that I'm just unconvinced by the evidence so far. So thank you for giving me a role model, a methodology to approach
I'll have to watch
the questions.
This segment.
And it was just like it was part of some clip of you. And I watched it, and it just was like, he's exactly right. Like, the way he answered that question is exactly right, and that is the way to tackle this stuff. To be
silver-tongued devil.
Yeah, to be just like how can you not love this person's enthusiasm for this topic? And you may disagree with them, but they're not being an asshole about it. And I thought that was great.
No, thank you.
And Brian, your ability to zoom in on topics that I didn't even think existed. and the level of research. And so the whole reason that I'm doing YouTube is because of you. So you were doing a series of videos where you're standing up in front of a green screen and you were explaining some topic.
In fact,
that's it. Yeah. I mean, you were like, I don't know if you were releasing them on YouTube or you were releasing them on Vimeo, you're doing something like that. And I said, Brian is bravely standing in front of the camera and doing these videos, and I know this is the thing that I should do, and so I should follow in his footsteps. And within a year of seeing you do those, I started to do my guide to space, and it's just been going ever since.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thanks. Both of you were both of you were sort of like, combined to my current method of doing things. So thank you.
Our pleasure.
All right. So shamelessly self-promote.
Richard Saunders from the Skeptic Zone podcast at skepticzone.tv.
And I'm Brian Dunning from the Skeptoid podcast at skeptoid.com. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget to go to theufo.movie.
Yes.
I hear they don't want you to see it.
The UFO movie they don't want you to see.
Right, yeah. All right, thanks, guys.
Hi everyone, this is Susan Garbeck from the Guerrilla Skepticism on Wikipedia project. We're always looking for editors from all around the world. If you think this might be something of interest to you, please reach out to me at susangarbeck@yahoo.com, or you can contact me on Facebook. Please send me a friend request and send me a private message. I'd love to hear from you.
Hello, everyone. This is Adrienne Hill from Skookum Studios in Calgary, Canada. This is newsletter number 188, and you can subscribe to this newsletter and get it delivered to your inbox every other week, complete with links to all the stories. Just visit www.skeptics.com.au. But now, let's see what Tim Mendham has for us this week. Hi all, says Tim. This is the last newsletter for 2023. We hope it has been an interesting, at least, year for you, and that you're looking forward, hopefully, to 2024, and we'll be back in early January. Have a safe and happy holiday season. But in the meantime, read on. Tim. Okay, Tim, I'll do just that. Anti-vaccine conspiracy has died suddenly. The phrase died suddenly, often used in reference to athletes dropping dead on the field, was popularized online, even spawning a horrifically inaccurate movie of the same name. Any death was instantly ruled to be because of COVID vaccines. But new data collected by the American Heart Association examined collegiate athletes and found that over a 20-year time frame, from 2002 to 2022, sudden cardiac death has continued to fall, decimating the conspiracy theory that young athletes were dying en masse after receiving their shots. Dangers of dabbling in the paranormal. This is a reasonable article on how different groups, skeptics and believers, react to the dangers of the paranormal. Is the danger opening a portal to horrors or impacting on the mental state of the believer? Spirit mediums in crime and suspense fiction. This article says that, quote, these con artists are experts at rooting out their vulnerable and emotionally fragile victims who grasp onto any vestige of hope, end quote. It then lists a number of literary works. It seems to take a turn in favor of the spooky reality of mediums and psychics. How the Exorcist movie altered belief in demons. On the 50th anniversary of the, quote, film that changed the horror genre, end quote, this is quite an interesting video that discusses the cultural impact of the film and then extends way beyond the movie itself into broader social issues of religion, politics, and social panic. Good if you have an hour and a quarter to spare. Werewolf at the Pentagon. Investigator Stephen Greenstreet takes apart the claims of an ex-Pentagon operative whose prognostications are taken very seriously by the UAP community, that an evil poltergeist followed him home from a visit to the infamous Skinwalker Ranch, a supposed hotspot for UFOs, ghosts, and monsters, of course. For years, this supposed werewolf encounter was just a spooky story told by paranormal activists, and no evidence was ever presented to support its validity. But in May 2023, a former Pentagon contractor finally presented an image of the alleged werewolf. And that's where this story gets even more weird. Leveraging astrology for behavioral studies of lab mice. Quote, forcing mice to solve a maze and find cheese at the end has been a mainstay of animal behavioral science for decades. This new framework greatly expedites the time investment required for experimenters to predicting which mice will be fast learners. In brief, astrology predicts that one should only use mice that are born between January 20th to February 18th, Aquarius, May 21st to June 20th, Gemini, August 23rd through October 22nd, Virgo and Libra for behavioral experiments, end quote. And before you get upset, this is a joke, learned paper. Look at the subheading for the journal. Oh, that's fun. The December 2023 issue of The Skeptic is out. It looks at some famous or infamous UFO and haunting claims, including an in-depth look at the recent, quote, I've not seen dead alien bodies, but I know they're there, end quote, kerfuffle. Plus a lot more, including a more serious look at some of the outrageous claims made at Mind, Body, Spirit festivals. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time to do so. You can sign up for a hard copy or digital edition, or both, since the digital is offered free to those who take up the hard copy version. Contact the editor if you're not sure if your existing subscription needs renewing. Learn more about our magazine and subscribe now. Items of interest. Travel tip. Ooh, the 10 most haunted bodies of water in the world. This ranges from a pool in northern Queensland to the Bermuda Triangle. There are mainly US examples, but there are a few international ring-ins. And if you scroll down the page, you can check out, quote, 14 haunted theme parks that were abandoned, end quote. Except most of them aren't haunted, just abandoned, which is an interesting phenomenon in its own right. How accurate were 2023 psychic predictions? Higgy Pop, the site that tends to toy with believers by talking nice to them and then throwing in the occasional skeptical curved ball, asked readers to make predictions for this year. How did they perform? I'm guessing you know, not very well. See the December 2021 of The Skeptic for the results of the Australian Skeptics' much more comprehensive 12-year project on Australian psychics. They also didn't do very well. Talking Dogs owner says skepticism from scientists hurts. The dog is stepping on pressure buttons. Oh. Oh, yeah, I've seen some videos of that. Okay, so let's try that again. The dog is stepping on pressure buttons in a soundboard device placed on the floor. Apparently, he is not alone in this, with other animals, including some cows doing the same thing. Bunny, the sheepadoodle, apparently knows about 100 words. The owner has a new book on the phenomenon coming out. Don't they all? One skeptical researcher says that humans, quote, might see more significance in the one positive button-pressing moment than the 9 trials where the buttons pressed made no sense, end quote. Car crashes into psychic reading business. 2 people were hospitalized after a driver crashed into a psychic reading business in Longwood, Florida. A person who was inside the building was taken to the hospital with minor injuries. Okay, go on. Say it. I know what you're thinking. How did they not see it coming? Silliest story of the week. Which houseplants best suit your star sign? Have you ever wondered if there are particular houseplants to match your personality and star sign? Probably not, but, quote, inviting a plant into our home is a big decision, is it? And choosing exactly which type of houseplant would best suit our space and lifestyle isn't an easy task, end quote, says celebrity psychic and astrologer Inbal Honigman. Jesus, Murphy, give us a break. And for the record, yours truly's preferred houseplant is apparently a cactus. Okay, we can be prickly. Well, that's the newsletter. Now I will go upstairs and have a nice double-double with a coffee crisp chocolate bar. And just so you know, a coffee crisp is a wonderful bar with alternating layers of vanilla wafers and a coffee-flavored filling. And it's all covered in milk chocolate. And according to Wikipedia, its Canadian history goes back to 1938. It was made by the British company Rowntree at a Toronto chocolate factory until 1988, when Nestle took it over. For those of you who live in Australia, you can find them at one of those wonderful specialized sweet or lolly shops, and I did see them at a lolly shop in the Blue Mountain area. In the US, they can be found in places like Wegmans and the Canadian section of Epcot at Walt Disney World. If you live in the UK, a coffee crisp can be purchased at the Stop and Shop markets. Otherwise, you might need to travel to Canada to try one. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill, and I hope you all have a wonderful holiday, and we'll see you in the new year. Dr. Harriet Hall, MD, known to thousands as the Skepdoc, was a retired family physician and former Air Force flight surgeon who wrote about medicine, so-called complementary and alternative medicine, science, quackery, and critical thinking. Harriet produced a free online course of 10 video lectures on science-based medicine and alternative medicine. The videos and an accompanying course guide can be found by following the link at skepdoc.info or by visiting tinyurl.com/Skepdoc series. Topics covered in the series are science-based medicine versus evidence-based medicine, what is CAM, chiropractic, acupuncture, homeopathy, naturopathy and herbal medicine, energy medicine, miscellaneous alternatives, pitfalls in research, and science-based medicine in the media and politics. Harriet covers each topic in a matter-of-fact, no-nonsense way that is sure to educate and entertain. Find it at tinyurl.com/Skepdoc series.
It's time once again to not go back to those pages at Trove. I'm going to read something out, but normally, as you know, I go to Trove at trove.nla.gov.au and see what the Australian media and media from around the world has to say about various skeptical issues, from the paranormal to alternative medicine and things like alien visitation. This week will be a bit different. A couple of days ago, I was out exercising before or after the heat of the day. I can't remember. Before, I think. And I was strolling down a local street here, Illawarra Road in Marrickville. Locals may know that road very well. When I happened across a Chinese medicine store, which was closed, but out the front were hanging some leaflets, or a box with leaflets inside. And these leaflets are very big. They're not A4, they're not letter, they're like A4, long A4. I wonder what letter size this is, page size this is. It's a big page. It's a big page. It's blue, printed on both sides in blue ink, and it looks to me like a template. A template. On one side, Acupuncture and Traditional Chinese Medicine. Complete healthcare for your whole family. On the other side, a brief introduction to Chinese herbs or herbs, if you're in America, with some line drawings of characters from ancient China. And on this page, on the bottom third of this page, is the details for the local practitioner, which I think is simply then included in the template. So this could be used around the world. Anyway, I thought it would be interesting to see what it said about acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine. This is the information you would collect, you would gather as you walked by, as I did. Acupuncture and Traditional Chinese Medicine. Complete healthcare for your whole family. Acupuncture and Traditional Chinese Medicine have a long history and are important healing arts originating in China. They can be traced back as far as the legendary period. 2852 BC. Nearly 5,000 years old. Now, cutting in, I won't stop everywhere to correct this, but suffice it to say, it is simply an assertion that acupuncture goes back 5,000 years, and you can easily look up, and we might do it on another occasion, all the conflicting accounts of how old acupuncture is, and I don't think any of them go back that far, for various reasons, including they didn't have the technology 5,000 years ago to have the very fine needle points used today. Anyway, let's read on. It is the oldest system of medicine still in use today, and is not only practiced and studied at universities and hospitals all over China, but also in some other countries such as Japan and Korea. And I think it's fair to say there are various other institutions around the world that at some stage or other used it or studied it or something like that. There is an energy in one's body called qi, C-H-I, or vital energy. Now, I will say here that this whole section starts with an assertion, as if it was fact. And I think it's quite safe to say that qi, or vital energy, is simply something someone made up one day. Qi is circulated in the body channels called meridian. Repeat what I just said. Meridians were simply one day made up. The meridians are symmetrically distributed over the entire body. Internally, they connect with 12 different organs: the 4 extremities, the sense organs, the ligament and the bone, the muscle and the skin, making the body an organic whole. Meridian can be classified into 2 groups: the main meridian and the extra meridian. There are 12 main meridians, 6 yang, or positive, and 6 yin, or negative, and 8 extra meridians. Wow, who knew? Who knew? Goodness me. In a healthy body, the energy circulates harmoniously throughout the meridians. If, for any reason, the circulation is blocked, the balance is upset and illness results. And this is truly Dark Age thinking. This is pre-scientific nonsense, to be blunt. The purpose of acupuncture is by inserting needles into the acupuncture points to restore the imbalance of yin and yang and harmonize the circulation of energy, the same purpose as the use of Chinese herbs. The main way of diagnosis in acupuncture and Chinese medicine is by feeling the pulse on the radial arteries, since the pulse is regulated through the meridians to the organs. By feeling the pulse, the practitioner is able to judge the level of energy in each organ. The the yin-yang balance, and choose the points or Chinese herbs to be used according to the pulse. Other ways of diagnosis include careful observation of the patient's colour, face and body features, tongue, nails, and temperature distribution on different areas of the body. And the word colour is spelt the British way, not the American way, which might give us a clue to who wrote this. It is very important to understand that acupuncture and Chinese medicine treat the patient as a whole entity, not just individual parts of the body. And that's the claim of a lot of so-called alternative medicine, as if medicine, real medicine, doesn't treat the patient, as a whole person. The body and mind are considered an integrated unit, where any imbalance of energy affects the whole, since the meridian have their roots in the internal organs. Okay, then. Also, every person is considered as a unique individual, different from everyone else. Thank heavens for that. Therefore, two persons might have the same symptoms, the cause of illness, and therefore the treatment will be different. Thus, because of the way it is practiced, acupuncture and Chinese medicine always aim at removing the cause of the illness and not the symptoms. Since the patient is treated as a whole, many patients find that sleep, digestion, and general energy become refreshed. It is essential that the patient has patience, and in time most symptoms will clear up. I think that's just called the natural healing process, regardless. In general, the older the illness, the longer it takes to cure it. Thus, patients should not expect a miracle. Also, since every person is treated as a unique individual, it is impossible to forecast exactly the duration of the treatment. This depends on the reaction to the treatment itself. Acupuncture can strengthen the immune system and the metabolism, harmonize the circulation of energy and blood, and improve the peripheral circulation. Also, adjust the tonicity of the nervous and muscular systems and harmonize secretion, etc. Harmonize secretion. It sounds like something from a dystopian future. Could that be a new novel? Well, maybe it's that new rock group I heard about, the harmonic secretions. For 5,000 years, you might detect that I'm not taking everything in this leaflet very seriously. For 5,000 years, acupuncture and Chinese medicine have successfully treated a variety of common ailments and serious diseases. There is practically no age limit for patients. Babies can be treated. Needles are not used. Massage of the points is sufficient. And there is no upper age limit. Treatment takes half an hour. Pregnant women can also be treated using special precautions in the choice of points. I wonder what those precautions are. Women can also be treated during menstrual periods, but it would be useful to inform the practitioner, as this may account for observed changes in the pulse. There can be many different reactions, but generally they can be divided into two broad categories. 1. A slow, progressive improvement. 2. An initial worsening of the symptoms for a short period followed by a marked improvement. This is quite normal and should not cause any alarm. And to all my doctor friends listening, I'm sure you're all face-palming right now. The acupuncture needles are made of solid stainless steel and nothing is injected through them. Disposable needles are to be used in practice. Model DRZ1 electrothermal needle is a new medical instrument, a product of combining channels and collateral science and acupuncture and moxibustion stimulation theory with modern scientific technology. The temperature is adjustable, 30 degrees Celsius to 700 degrees Celsius. its treating effectiveness to skin tumour is 90%. Now there is a real medical claim. Its treating effectiveness to skin tumour is 90%. There is good treating effect too for various cold diseases, such as spleen and stomach diseases, rheumatic pain, and cervical lymphanode for metastasis, I think that word is, etc. Treating categories of acupuncture and Chinese medicine: arthritic, rheumatic, and fibrostic conditions, I'm not sure what that means, tonsillitis, spinal problems, lumbago, backaches, stiff neck and shoulders, sciatica, gout, tennis elbow, muscular sprains and strains, cramps, sports injuries, neuritis, trigeminal neuralgia, sounds bad, Bell's palsy, facial paralysis, sequelae of apoplexy hemiplegia, migraine headaches, vertigo, nervous disorders, tension and anxiety, depression, insomnia, poor memory, palpitations, neurasthenia, lack of energy, weariness, weight and smoking problems, fluid retention, impotence and sexual problems, climacteric and menstrual disorders, mastitis, mastodenoma, upset stomach, vomiting, chronic colitis, chronic diarrhea, gastric and duodenal ulcers, constipation, renal colic, kidney and liver disorders, chronic cystitis and urethritis, blood pressure and heart problems, allergies, asthma, hay fever, sinusitis, bedwetting, catarrh, chronic otitis media, don't know what that is, hearing defect, certain eye problems. What? Sorry, I have visions of little acupuncture needles. Won't go there. Certain eye problems such as optic atrophy, drug and alcohol addiction, skin complaint, acne, loss of hair, cosmetic, etc. So it can treat more. I guess, and that's the end of the page, I guess you can have a health system or a claimed health system and say it treats all these conditions. Whether it does anything or not is another story. And as I say, on the other side of this long page is a brief introduction to Chinese herbs, which we won't go into today. And at the bottom is the large advertisement. Oh, that's not correct. It's the large notification of the business in question, and it says it's so and so clinic, and the person running it has the following degrees: DAC, DTC, MTCH. Graduated in China, researched in Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japan. Member of the International Acupuncture Society, member of the All China Association of Traditional Chinese Medicine, member of Acupuncture Ethics and Standards Organization, member of the Australian Natural Therapists Association, member of the Australian Acupuncture Association. Specializing in acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine and herbalism, therapies, laser and electronic and electrothermal acupuncture, moxibustion, and Chinese herbs are available. Workers' compensation and third-party accepted if referral from GP obtained. Most health funds rebate. Now, to my way of thinking, there's an awful lot of claims, medical claims, made in this flyer. Well, there we go. A look at just something I picked up on my walk. And it turned out to be quite a fascinating little dive into what certain people think, or how certain people think the world really works. As I said before, it is almost certainly the case that acupuncture points and meridians and chi and all that was simply one day just made up. Or maybe they went through some sort of evolutionary process of a vague idea which was sort of refined a little bit. That was an interesting little side trip for the Trove segment next week. Hopefully we'll get back into the Trove proper. And I think next week we might be looking at something like miracle cures or miracle water. I was looking up the other day. That might be interesting. But this week, yes, we had a look at that interesting information flyer, because when you go for a walk down the street, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast, and thank you very much to Brian Dunning and Fraser Cain for joining me on that 5-week adventure discussing skeptical topics. It was a really pleasant afternoon, and we did much more. In fact, we spent even more time, I think, discussing aliens and the possibility of alien life in the universe. And that is being worked on as I speak, and that will appear... That discussion will appear, and you'll find that surprising, I did, on the YouTube channel of Brian Dunning, which is youtube.com/@thebriandunning. I'll add a link in this week's show notes. And the good news, the amazingly good news for everybody, is also Brian has an aim of getting only 1,000 subscribers to that channel. That's not very many. He's almost there, I think, or he's well on his way. When he gets 1,000 subscribers, he is going to release the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See free to the world on that channel. So here's your chance to hasten that day coming. Go to youtube.com/@thebriandunning. Subscribe. There's lots of interesting things up there to be sure. And you too will help the rest of the world get to see this wonderful documentary. This documentary, by the way, is winning awards in all sorts of movie festivals around the world. So if you haven't seen it yet, you can still see it by the link by going to theufo.movie. But if you want to see it in glorious YouTube vision, subscribe to Brian's channel, and soon the whole world can be watching that movie. Now, I mentioned Melanie Trecek-King, and I have this message from the Victorian Skeptics, and this is a talk given in Northcote on Monday, the 18th of December at 7:30 p.m. The venue is the Private Theatre Northcote. Cost is only $5. And the topic will be Floater, a toolkit for staying afloat in a sea of misinformation. Melanie is a terrific speaker. If you haven't had the chance to see her, if you didn't see her at the Skeptics Convention just the other week, this is your chance if you're in Melbourne. And I will add a link how to book for that event in this week's show notes. Again, it's Monday night, so as I record this, it's tomorrow night in Melbourne at Northcote at 7:30 p.m. And speaking of things south of the border, I received this message from Don Hyatt, who is a strong supporter of skepticism, and he's writing to tell me of the details of the Surf Coast Skepticamp number 9. And this will be on Saturday, the 24th of February, 2024, at Aries Inlet. Now in the before times, right at the beginning of the pandemic, or should I say just before the beginning of the pandemic or something like that, I had the pleasure of speaking at Surf Coast Skepticamp. And it was a wonderful weekend. My goodness me, I was with some of the best people in the world, having a wonderful little trip down to that area. The Surf Coast in Victoria is just beautiful. And I encourage everybody to see if they can make it to Surf Coast Skepticamp. As Don writes, this idyllic location is a chance to have a brief sea change and enjoy the delights of the Great Ocean Road whilst enriching your lives skeptically. Many stay the weekend in the area and relax, which is what I did. What a wonderful time. Oh, Japanese pancakes, I tell you what. Yum, yum, yum. in the beautiful environs of Erie Inlet and the delights of the Surf Coast and the Great Ocean Road. Just a beautiful place of the world, it really is. I am pleased to announce, writes Don, that the program will be headlined by newly crowned Skeptic of the Year, Paul Gallagher. Skeptic camps are all about involvement and contribution. No more slacktivism. Consider making a contribution yourself. We want to hear what you have to say. A 20-minute presentation on something that would interest a skeptical audience is all we ask. And then he says, but most importantly, be there to celebrate the demise of COVID restrictions and the triumph of vaxxers over anti-vaxxers. And if you would like to have a chat to Don about your possible involvement, his address is cgofv@gmail.com. So send a note to Don if you'd like to speak at Surf Coast Skeptic Camp or you'd like to be involved. Well, with all those announcements being said and done, and the temperature in the studio rising, I think the microphone's melting, the cords have melted anyway, there's puddles on the floor. This is Richard Saunders, signing off.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.